Ashdown, Arkansas, in the spring of 1994, was a place where the air hung thick and green, heavy with the scent of damp earth and blooming honeysuckle. The horizon stretched flat as a tabletop, interrupted only by the skeletal silhouettes of cottonwood trees and the occasional glint of sunlight off rusted tractor husks abandoned in overgrown fields. I was Travis Murdoch then, a junior officer with the Ashdown Police Department, my badge still bright with newness, my sense of purpose as crisp as the starched collar of my uniform. I'd grown up here, the son of hardware store owners, stacking nails and bolts in the back room while my father swapped stories with farmers and my mother tallied receipts with a pencil tucked behind her ear. Ashdown was small, 2,000 people, give or take, tucked into the southwest corner of the state, a speck on the map where everyone knew your name, your kin, and the exact spot where you'd parked your truck last Sunday. I'd always figured law enforcement would be a quiet gig here, a way to keep the peace in a town that rarely stirred beyond the hum of cicadas or the clatter of a train rolling past the mill. For a while, it was exactly that. My days were a steady rhythm of routine, unlocking cars for folks who'd left their keys on the dash, shooing rowdy teens away from the railroad tracks after they'd split a six-pack, or sipping coffee on Miss Ellie's porch while she rambled about her cats, her voice a soft drawl that smoothed the edges of my long shifts. I liked the simplicity of it, the way I could name every face at the diner, the way the old man in the beat-up Ford waved as he trundled off to fish the little river. It was a life I understood, a life that fit me like a worn pair of boots. But that spring, something shifted, a subtle tilt in the world's axis that I didn't notice until it was too late. It crept in slow, a shadow sliding over the sun, and by the time I saw it for what it was, it had already hollowed me out, leaving me a stranger to the town I'd called home. Started with the dogs, or at least that's when I first paid attention. A handful of calls trickled into the station, voices tight with worry. Rusty didn't come back last night, or I let Daisy out, and she just vanished. We brushed it off at first. Ashdown's police force was lean, just me, Larry Henshaw, Pete Carver, and Chief Dale Eastman, a grizzled veteran who'd been keeping order since Nixon was in office. Dogs wandered off all the time, chasing rabbits or rooting through trash. The outskirts were wild enough, tangles of briars and pine thickets, that a hound could get lost for days and still turn up muddy and grinning. But the calls kept coming, a quiet drumbeat of unease, and then old man Pritchard shuffled into the station one morning, his flannel shirt patched at the elbows, his eyes roomy and wide. "Something took my blue," he said, voice quivering like a plucked string. "Heard him howlin' out by the mill. Then nothing. Just cut off." I leaned against the counter, sipping lukewarm coffee, and tried to reassure him. "Probably the wind, Mr. Pritchard," I said, flashing the easy grin I'd honed behind the hardware counter. "Or maybe he's shacked up with a lady friend." He didn't laugh, just stared at me, his gnarled hands twisting the brim of his cap. "Weren't no wind, Travis. Something's out there." I nodded, promised I'd look into it, but as he shuffled out, a chill brushed my spine, faint as a whisper. A week later, the cow turned up dead. Jim Haskell, a farmer with a spread out past the cattle pens, called it in, his voice crackling over the radio. "You gotta see this, Trav," he said. "Ain't natural." Larry and I drove out in the cruiser, the gravel road crunching under the tires, the air thick with the promise of rain. Haskell met us at the gate, his overalls streaked with mud, his face pale beneath the brim of his John Deere cap. The cow lay sprawled in the pasture, a black and white Holstein, its belly ripped open, guts glistening in the midday sun. Flies swarmed in a black cloud, their buzz a low, insistent hum that set my teeth on edge. The cuts weren't clean, jagged, frenzied, like someone had hacked at it with a dull blade, but they weren't random either. There was intent there, a brutal purpose I couldn't fathom. What stopped me cold, though, were the footprints, barefoot, human-sized, pressed deep into the soft earth around the carcass. They circled it, a slow, deliberate dance, then trailed off toward the tree line before fading into the grass. I crouched, tracing one with my finger, the soil cool and damp against my skin. "Coyote don't walk like that," Larry muttered, shifting his weight beside me. He was a big guy, ex-linebacker with a laugh that could fill a room, but his voice was thin now, uncertain. Kids, maybe? I suggested, but the words felt hollow. No kid I knew would wander barefoot through a muddy field to butcher a cow. Haskell scratched his beard, squinting at the horizon. Been hearin' things at night, he said. Rustlin', like someone's watchin'. Thought it was deer, but now... He didn't finish, just spat into the dirt and turned away. The rumors took root then, spreading through Ashdown like kudzu. At the diner, Miss Ellie clucked about a rogue cougar, her spatula tapping a nervous rhythm against the griddle. The old-timers at the barbershop swapped tales of rabid dogs and poachers, their voices low, eyes darting to the windows. I tried to laugh it off, to keep the lightness I'd always carried, but those prints stuck with me. They weren't right. Too deep, too purposeful. And every time I closed my eyes, I saw them, stark against the earth, leading somewhere I didn't want to follow. Dale caught wind of the unease and called a meeting at the station. His weathered face creased with concern. Folks are spooked, he said, leaning back in his chair, the springs creaking under his bulk. Let's do a sweep of the outskirts, settle him down. I nodded, but my gut twisted, a cold knot of dread I couldn't shake. I didn't know what we'd find, but I knew it wouldn't be simple. It was mid-May, the air sticky with humidity, when I spotted the truck. I was alone, cruising the back roads near the old cattle pens, the radio crackling with static as I scanned the fields. The sun hung low, painting the pines in shades of gold and shadow, when I caught a glint of metal through the trees. A pickup, no plates, tucked into a clearing like it was trying to disappear. From the road, it looked like any other junker. Faded blue paint, dented fender, the kind of rig you'd see rusting in a barn. But something about it pulled me closer. I parked the cruiser, grabbed my flashlight, and stepped out, the gravel crunching under my boots. Ashdown PD, I called, my voice swallowed by the stillness. No answer, just the whine of mosquitoes and the distant croak of a bullfrog. Up close, the truck felt wrong, alive, almost in a way that made my skin prickle. The windows were cracked, spiderwebbed with fractures. The driver's seat sagging under a dark, sticky stain that spread like a bruise across the upholstery. I leaned in, the beam of my flashlight catching flecks of rust and something else. Flakes of dried blood, maybe, or oil. The air shifted then, a faint whiff of decay curling up from the bed, sweet and cloying, like meat left too long in the sun. I circled around, my boots sinking into the soft earth, and found a pile of flattened cardboard, a coil of rope, and a heap of scrap metal. Bent nails, a twisted hubcap, a length of chain. Flies buzzed in a frantic swarm, drawn to something beneath the junk. I swallowed hard, my throat dry, and nudged the pile with my foot. The dog was fresh, too fresh. A big mutt, maybe a shepherd mix, its tan fur matted with blood, its body carved open with cuts too precise for any animal. The head lolled at an angle, eyes cloudy, tongue hanging slack. My stomach lurched, bile rising in my throat, and I stumbled back, the flashlight trembling in my hand. This wasn't a prank, not some bored kid with a knife. This was deliberate, vicious, the work of someone who'd taken pleasure in it. I fumbled for my radio, my voice shaky as I called Larry. Found something out by the pens, I said. Truck. And you need to see this. He was there in 10 minutes, his cruiser kicking up dust, his broad frame tense as he joined me. Jesus, Trav, he whispered, staring at the dog. What the hell's going on? Dale rolled up soon after, his revolver holstered but his hand hovering near it, his gray eyes sharp beneath the brim of his hat. Keep looking, he said, his voice a low growl. I didn't want to. I was starting to wonder if I'd signed up for more than I could handle, but I nodded, swallowing the fear that clawed at my chest. The clearing stretched out from the truck, a narrow path winding through the weeds toward a shape in the distance. A trailer, squat and crumbling, half hidden by the pines. Its aluminum siding was streaked with rust, the windows boarded with splintered plywood, the door reinforced with iron bars welded at odd angles. It looked like a bunker or a cage or a tomb. My breath caught, the air growing heavier, fouler, as we approached. "Ashdown PD," I shouted, my voice echoing back unanswered. Larry gripped his flashlight, his knuckles white. We heard a shuffle then, faint but deliberate, a sound that made my pulse spike. We drew our weapons, mine a standard-issue Glock, Larry's a heavier revolver, and edged closer, the trailer looming like a predator crouched in wait. "Come out with your hands up," I called, my voice steadier than I felt. Silence, thick and oppressive, pressed down on us. Then a voice, deep and ragged, erupted from inside. "You got no right. This is my place. Leave me be." It trembled with rage, a wild edge that set my nerves alight. "Police," I shouted back. "Open the door now." Another pause, then a clang, metal on metal, and the sound of footsteps, quick and uneven, retreating deeper inside. Larry glanced at me, his jaw tight, and nodded. We had to go in. The door was chained from the inside, the padlock rusted but solid. Dale radioed for backup, but we couldn't wait. Something was happening, something we couldn't let slip away. Larry wedged a crowbar from the cruiser under the chain, and we heaved, the links groaning before snapping with a sharp crack. The door swung open, and the stench hit us like a fist, rotting food, sweat, a sour tang of decay that coated my tongue. The hallway was narrow, cluttered with junk. Empty cans, yellowed newspapers, a broken chair tipped on its side. The walls were streaked with grime, smears of something dark, mud, blood, I couldn't tell. And the floor creaked under our boots, soft in places where rot had taken hold. Halfway down, a shadow lunged from a doorway, a tall, wiry figure, swinging a crowbar in a wild arc. It caught Larry square on the shoulder, a dull thud followed by his sharp grunt as he stumbled back, his gun clattering to the floor. "Stop!" I yelled, raising my Glock, my hands slick with sweat. The man darted into another room, quick as a rat, his footsteps pounding the boards. I grabbed Larry's arm, hauled him up. He winced, clutching his shoulder, and we pursued, adrenaline flooding my veins like liquid fire. The trailer twisted around us, a maze of tight corners and sagging walls, the air growing thicker, more rancid, with every step. We burst into the back room, and time slowed. A battered table dominated the space, its surface scarred and stained, cords and chains draped across it like sleeping snakes. Dark pools glistened on the floorboards, blood, old and fresh, mingled with dirt. In the corner, a blanket covered a pile of shapes, lumps I mistook for clothes until I saw the rigidity, the unnatural stillness. My stomach twisted, my breath shallow and sharp. Larry swept his flashlight across the room, its beam catching glints of metal, a meat hook dangling from the ceiling, a rusted blade propped against the wall. Then the man charged again, erupting from behind a tattered curtain, his crowbar raised high. He was tall, gaunt, dressed in filthy jeans and a shirt so grimy it clung to his frame like a second skin. His hair was a wild tangle, his glasses crooked on his nose, slipping as he swung. His face, God, his face, was sunken, cheeks hollow, eyes narrow and bloodshot, burning with a fury that wasn't human. I ducked, the crowbar whistling past my head, and Larry lunged, trying to wrestle it from him. The man twisted free, his strength feral, and bolted past me, aiming for the front door. We gave chase, stumbling over debris, my boots slipping on the slick floor, my heart slamming against my ribs. He yanked the door open, and there was Dale, revolver steady, his voice a thunderclap. "Drop it! Now!" The man froze, crowbar raised, a snarl twisting his lips. He lunged and Dale fired, a single shot clean and loud, catching him in the thigh. He crumpled, the crowbar clattering away, and I was on him, kicking the weapon out of reach, cuffing his wrists as he thrashed and spat curses. His blood pooled on the stoop, bright against the gray wood, and I stood there, panting, the world spinning, dizzying, unreal, until the weight of what lay inside crashed over me. We secured him, dragged him to the cruiser, his screams echoing through the pines. "You're trespassing! This is God's work. You can't stop it." His voice was a jagged blade, cutting through the dusk, and those eyes, those manic, piercing eyes, locked onto mine, promising something I couldn't name. Dale held him down, his face grim, while Larry radioed for the state troopers, his voice cracking. I turned back to the trailer, my legs heavy, and forced myself inside again. We had to know. The back closet was where we found them. 2 bodies, shoved into the cramped space like forgotten luggage. The door stuck, swollen with damp, and when it gave, the smell poured out, a wave of rot that made my eyes water. I clicked on my flashlight, the beam trembling as it swept over them. Older men, 50s or 60s, their skin gray and mottled, eyes staring blankly into the dark. One had a beard, patchy and white, his mouth slack. The other's face was bruised, a dark bloom across his cheek. They were wrapped in plastic sheeting, duct taped tight, but the decay had seeped through, staining the walls, the floor, my memory. I gagged, stepped back, and Larry gripped my shoulder, his breath ragged. "Christ, Trav," he whispered. "What is this?" We searched the rest, cataloging the horror. The table held tools, pliers, a hacksaw, a coil of wire, streaked with blood and rust. The walls were plastered with newspaper clippings, obituaries torn from papers across Arkansas and beyond, some dated years back, others fresh enough that the ink still smudged. They were pinned haphazardly, overlapping, smeared with fingerprints. The closet's interior was scratched with tally marks. Dozens, maybe hundreds, etched into the wood with a blade or a nail. I counted them later, in my head, over and over, trying to make sense of it. Were they days? Victims? A countdown to something worse? I didn't know, and the not knowing gnawed at me. The state troopers arrived as night fell, their lights slicing through the gloom, drawing a crowd of townsfolk who'd heard the shot. They stood at the edge of the clearing, faces pale, whispering. Some recognized the truck, said they'd seen it parked by the old church on Highway 71. Months back, its driver a quiet man who'd kept to himself. No one had thought much of it then, just another drifter passing through. But now it clicked, a puzzle piece snapping into place. We worked half the night, photographing, bagging evidence, the trailer's stench clinging to our clothes. Larry's shoulder was swollen, purpled with bruising, but he waved off the medics, cracking a weak joke about needing a raise. I tried to smile, but my face felt stiff. My mind stuck on those bodies, those eyes, that voice howling about God. I got home past midnight, the house silent except for the hum of the fridge. I sank onto the couch, the TV off, my uniform still damp with sweat and grime. I couldn't shower, not yet. Couldn't wash away the night until I'd made sense of it. I sat there, listening to my own breath, ragged and uneven, and thought about the victims. Who were they? Drifters, maybe, or farmhands down on their luck? Men with families somewhere who'd never know why they didn't come home. I thought about Ashdown, my Ashdown, the diner, the hardware store, the river's lazy curve, and how it wasn't safe anymore. Not the way I'd believed. Evil wasn't a big city phantom, a story from the news. It was here, in my backyard, wearing a human face. The next day, we learned more. His name was Elias Crow, 34, a ghost from the Ozarks with a rap sheet, assault in Missouri, petty theft in Oklahoma, a string of aliases. He'd been in Ashdown for months, squatting in that trailer, blending into the edges of town like a shadow. The truck's contents, the blood, the knife, the map, painted a picture of a man who'd been hunting, planning, leaving trails we'd missed. The bodies were identified eventually. James Tully, 58, a Texarkana drifter with a rap sheet of his own, and an unnamed man, mid-60s, with a rose tattoo and no kin to claim him. Autopsies showed they'd been beaten, strangled, kept alive for days before he'd finished them. The why eluded us. Crow wouldn't talk, just stared through the hospital bars, his leg bandaged, his silence a wall we couldn't breach. Weeks passed. The hardware store opened at 8. Miss Ellie flipped her sign to open. Life trudged on. But I wasn't the same. Cruising those back roads, I kept my hand near the radio, my eyes on the shadows. The trailer stayed with me. Its reek, its stains, the cold fire in Crow's gaze when he charged Dale. He was locked up, facing trial, and we gave the families what closure we could. But it didn't fill the hollow inside me. People thanked us, said we'd done good, and Dale clapped my shoulder, his voice gruff with pride. Maybe I should have felt it, but all I felt was shaken. Shaken by how close we'd come to something worse, by how evil didn't need a reason, just an opening. So, reader, here's where I turn it back to you. Could you sleep knowing this happened where you live, where you've built your life? What would you do if the quiet you've trusted turned feral, showing you a face you never imagined? I'd love to hear, because once you've seen that hollow, it doesn't let you go. Let's linger here, dig deeper, because the Ashdown trailer murders weren't a single night's terror. They were a slow rot, a descent that stretched across weeks, months, years, seeping into the marrow of the town and the man I used to be. I've given you the frame, but there's more to unearth, more to feel in the damp air. The creaking boards, the eyes that still watch me from the dark. John Langan's craft demands we wallow in it. Let the dread build like a storm on the horizon. So follow me back to those days, to the layers I can't shake. The signs were there long before the truck, whispering warnings I didn't hear. The dogs weren't the first to vanish. Looking back, I see the thread stretching into the winter of '93. A farmer's rooster turned up dead in December, its neck twisted, feathers strewn across the coop like a burst pillow. I'd gone out there, boots crunching on frost, and called it a fox, my breath fogging in the cold. But the farmer, a wiry man named Cobb, shook his head. "Ain't no fox this clean," he'd said, pointing to the bird's snapped spine. I'd shrugged, filed it away, let it fade. Then Pritchard's hound, then a tabby cat from Mrs. Hensley's porch, then the cow, each a note in a song I didn't recognize until the melody turned sour. I'd heard things too out on patrol. Late nights, driving the outskirts, the radio off, I'd catch sounds. A rustle in the pines, a low whine cut short, a thud like something heavy hitting the ground. I'd roll down the window, the air sharp with pine and river mud, and listen, but it'd be gone, swallowed by the dark. I told myself it was deer, or the wind, or my imagination playing tricks after too many hours awake. But Pritchard's words stuck. Something's out there. And I started keeping my flashlight closer, my hand brushing the Glock more often than I'd admit. The town felt it too, though no one said it outright. At the diner, Miss Ellie's chatter grew clipped, her eyes flicking to the door when the bell jangled. The barbershop hummed with unease, the old men's stories veering from fishing yarns to hushed tales of strange lights by the mill, shadows moving where no one should be. I'd walk Main Street, nodding at familiar faces, and catch a wariness in their glances, a tightness in their smiles. Ashdown was still Ashdown. The river flowed, the cottonwoods swayed, but it was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. That pickup wasn't just evidence. It was a reliquary, a vessel for Crow's madness. After we towed it to the impound lot, the troopers dissected it under floodlights, their gloved hands peeling back its layers. The stains on the seat were blood, human and animal, layered over months, mixed with sweat and a chemical bite. Kerosene, the lab said, used to clean or burn. The glove box held that map, Arkansas unfolded and worn, Ashdown circled in red ink, lines radiating to towns like Hope, Prescott, DeQueen, places he'd been or planned to go. A name was scrawled in the corner, Elias, in a shaky hand, and I wondered if he'd written it himself, a reminder of who he was or who he'd become. Under the passenger seat, the pocket knife gleamed, its blade chipped but keen, flecks of dried blood caught in the hilt. In the bed, beneath the cardboard and rope, they found the glove, leather cracked and stiff, the palm crusted with gore that matched James Tully's DNA. A plastic bag held scraps of cloth, torn and stained, maybe from his victim's clothes, maybe from his own. And in the toolbox, bolted to the frame, a single Polaroid, faded, creased, showing a man tied to a chair, his face blurred with terror, the background a blur of wood and shadow. We never identified him, never found a body to match, but I see him still, staring out from that photo, a ghost in Crow's gallery. I stood in the lot that night, watching them bag it all, the air cold against my sweat-damp skin. That truck had been his shadow, creeping through Ashdown unnoticed, parked by the church or idling on dirt roads while he hunted. The townsfolk who'd seen it, Mrs. Carter from the post office, young Timmy who biked past, hadn't blinked. It was just another truck, another piece of the landscape. Now it was a predator, unmasked, and I couldn't look at any vehicle without wondering what it hid. The trailer was a cathedral of ruin, every inch a testament to Crow's descent. We went back the next day, armed with lights and masks, and tore it open. The hallway was a gauntlet, piles of trash, broken glass, a mattress stained with fluids I didn't name. The walls bore his mark. Clippings pinned with rusted tacks, obituaries of men and women, some local: John Harrow, 62, died 91. Mary Tate, 47, 89. Others from towns miles away, their deaths spanning a decade. They weren't trophies, not exactly. They were a litany, a prayer scratched in ink and grief, smudged with his fingerprints. The back room was his altar. The table stains told a story. Blood, old and black, fresh and red, layered like rings in a tree. The cords were nylon, frayed but strong, the chains cold and heavy, links rusted shut with use. The meat hook swayed when I brushed it, its tip blackened, a faint residue clinging to the steel, skin maybe or fat. A tin can held nails, bent and bloodied, and a notebook lay open, its pages filled with scrawled rants. The unclean must be purged. God sees all. Their screams are hymns. The handwriting was jagged, frantic, ink bleeding into the paper like wounds. The closet was the heart of it. The tally marks, 73 I counted later, were carved deep, some fresh, some weathered, a record of his work. The bodies were crumpled, knees bent, heads lolling against the walls. James Tully's wallet held a faded photo of a woman, maybe a wife, smiling in a sundress. The other man's tattoo, that rose, was vivid against his gray skin, thorns curling around a name too faded to read. The plastic sheeting crackled when we moved them, the tape peeling back to reveal cuts. Shallow, deliberate, like he'd taken his time. The smell stayed with me, a rancid sweetness that coated my lungs, my dreams. Elias Crow was a cipher, a man carved from shadow and spite. We dug into his past, piecing together fragments. Born in the Ozarks, mother dead young, father a drunk who'd vanished. He drifted through Missouri, Arkansas, Oklahoma, leaving bruises and whispers in his wake. Assault in Joplin, a bar fight in Tulsa, a stolen car in Little Rock. Witnesses described him the same. Tall, wiry, glasses thick and smudged, voice low and rough, like gravel underfoot. He'd work cash jobs, fixing engines, hauling hay, then disappear, a ghost in dirty denim. In Ashdown, he'd been invisible, squatting in that trailer since late '93, maybe earlier. The church folks remembered him lingering after services, silent in the back pew, his eyes fixed on the cross. No one approached, he didn't invite it, and he'd slip away, the truck rumbling into the night. His leg healed in the hospital, the bullet wound a clean through and through, but he wouldn't speak, not to us, not to the lawyers. At trial, he sat stone still, staring past the judge, the jury, the gallery, his lips twitching with a smile that wasn't there. Life without parole, they ruled, and he was gone, swallowed by the system. But his presence lingered, a stain I couldn't scrub out. Ashdown tried to heal, but the scars ran deep. The diner stayed open, Miss Ellie flipping pancakes with a forced cheer, but her hands shook when she poured coffee. The hardware store hummed with business. Folks buying locks, floodlights, anything to feel safe. But my parents' voices were quieter, their glances sharper. Kids stopped roaming the fields. Parents called them in before dusk, their shouts echoing down empty streets. The old man with the truck died that summer, heart attack, though Mrs. Carter swore it was the fear that killed him. The way he'd clutch his chest when he spoke of that night. I stayed on the force, kept patrolling, but the badge weighed more, the radio a tether I gripped too tight. Every call, a missing cat, a strange noise, made my pulse spike, my mind racing to the trailer, the truck, the bodies. I drive past that clearing, now just a patch of dirt where the trailer once stood, and feel it watching me, a hollow eye in the earth. They burned the trailer eventually, hauled its ashes away, but the ground refused to heal. No grass, no weeds, just barren soil, like it remembered. A second question. Here's another for you, reader. Have you ever felt a place breathe, felt its gaze on your back? Do you think evil sinks into the earth, leaving a mark you can't see but can't ignore? I felt it, lived it, and I need to know if you have too. Share it with me so I don't carry this alone. It's April 7th, 2025 as I write this, and I'm still Travis Murdoch, still here, though the boy who stacked nails is long gone. The badge is tarnished, the pride a faint echo, but I keep going, patrolling roads that feel narrower, darker. I've seen other cases, burglaries, overdoses, a stabbing down by the tracks, but none cut like 1994. Maybe it was my first, or maybe it was Ashdown, the betrayal of a place I'd loved. I don't laugh much now. The humor that shielded me feels frail against the memory of Crow's voice, the weight of those chains, the tally marks scratched into my mind. I sit on my porch some nights, the river a distant murmur, the crickets a chorus that doesn't soothe. I scan the horizon, double-check my locks, wake to phantom footsteps that vanish when I reach for the light. Ashdown's still home. Miss Ellie's biscuits still draw a crowd. The hardware store sign still creaks. But it's not the sanctuary I knew. Evil found us once, slipped through the cracks, and I can't shake the dread it'll return. Wearing a new face, whispering a new lie. Crow's locked away, his shadow caged, but it stretches long, touching me still, a hollow echo I'll carry to my grave. That's my story, raw and unpolished. A window into the darkness that broke me open. Maybe you'll find meaning in it, a thread I've lost, but for me, it's a warning. No matter how quiet your world, how familiar its rhythm, there's always a chance something's waiting, patient and hungry, just beyond the light.